The limestone should have broken into gravel. I set the point of my chisel against a pale seam, wiped rain from my eyes, and tapped it with the square face of my mason's hammer. The first strike made a dull click. The second sent a silver line through the rock. On the third, something inside the quarry wall moved through my wrist like a remembered breath. My shoulders lowered, my feet shifted half a boot apart. I had never used that stance before, yet it felt worn smooth by 20 years of practice. I swung. The hammer rang like a bell. A block longer than my arm slid from the wall with 4 clean sides, no chips, no crooked fracture, just one perfect stone resting in the mud where 100 academy students had failed to cut even a brick. Then a voice with no sound said, "Repeated labor detected. Extracted trace. Journeyman split." I stared at the hammer. "You could have mentioned that yesterday." The hammer remained a hammer. It had a stained oak handle, a head spotted with rust, and the conversational warmth of a boiled turnip. 3 days earlier, I had stood beneath the crystal dome of Hale Academy while 600 students received their classes. Blades flashed around future knights. Colored fire circled the young mages. A boy behind me awakened as a dragon lancer and fainted from happiness before his dragon had even arrived. When my turn came, the crystal printed one word in gray light: Stonecutter. There was no strength bonus, no stone armor, and no secret earth spell. I could identify common building rock, hold a chisel correctly, and estimate a straight line. The scholarship clerk removed my silver badge before the light had faded. "Combat scholarships require combat potential," he said. He did not sound cruel. That made it worse. "You may remain as a work student. The abandoned West Quarry needs someone to reduce fallen stone for road fill." My new room was a leaking tool shed. My uniform was exchanged for a brown work coat. My meal token bought soup if the cook tilted the ladle generously, which he did not. At sunset on my first day, Quartermaster Bram walked me to the quarry gate. He was shaped like a barrel and had the tired face of a man who had issued too many swords to people who immediately lost them. "1 hammer, 2 chisels, 1 wedge," he said, dropping each item into my hands. "Bring back the metal if you quit. I do not care what happens to the handle." Does everyone expect me to quit? No, Cook Fenn thinks you will be buried first. That was how I received my tool, my workplace, and my first professional prediction. The West Quarry had once supplied every foundation block beneath the academy. Now rainwater filled its lowest terraces. Brambles covered the crane rails. Half the retaining wall leaned over a drainage channel packed with broken limestone. The academy called the place abandoned, but the small houses below it still depended on that channel. If the next storm pushed the wall down, mud and quarry water would cross the road and enter the lower dormitories. I learned this because a cold drop landed on my forehead while I lay in the shed, and a silent line of pale words appeared in the dark. Stone remembered work. Not thoughts, not names. Work. Every repeated blow, every foot pressed against a floor, every spell practiced near a wall left a faint order in the mineral. My old hammer could draw one dominant trace through stone only after I had exposed the layer, cleaned it, tested its grain, and completed 3 deliberate strikes. I could hold one extracted trace until sunrise. If I forced crossed or damaged memories together, the stone would fracture and the shock would travel back through the tool. The rule sounded generous until I tried it. My first target was a loose paving slab beside the shed. Hundreds of boots had crossed it. I imagined extracting perfect balance. I brushed away the dirt, squared the edge, and struck 3 times. The slab gave me the memory of limping. I spent 10 minutes walking in a circle before the trace faded. Somewhere in the history of Hale Academy, one extremely persistent injured man had used that path every day. My second attempt came from the quarry stairs. The stone held 1,000 hurried descents, so I expected quick feet. Instead, I absorbed the powerful habit of carrying a bucket on my left side. My body kept reaching for a bucket that did not exist. By midnight, I understood the first limit. Stone preserved repetition, not importance. My gift could reveal a possibility, but it could not tell me whether the possibility was useful. I had to read the where, isolate the right layer, and know enough about the work to choose. That was why I was standing in the rain when the impossible block fell free. The section of limestone had old wedge scars at ankle height. A faint row of boot dents faced the wall. Someone had cut stone there for years, always from the same position. I cleaned moss from a band no wider than my hand and followed the natural grain instead of the newest crack. The extracted movement had not made my arm stronger. It had shown me when the rock stopped resisting. I tried to repeat the cut without the trace. The chisel skated. A sharp flake flew past my cheek. My next blow drove too deep and left a star crack across the useful face. So the dead worker was better than me, I told the hammer. Good, that means I can learn something. I set the damaged block aside instead of pretending it was fine. Then I measured the drainage channel. The old retaining wall did not need gravel. It needed a spillway throat, a stone collar that would keep loose debris away from the drain and direct water beneath the road. The academy had sent me to crush rock because crushed rock was cheap. A fitted collar would be permanent. I made a plan in chalk on the shed door. 2 side blocks would lean into the stable bank. A cap block would lock them. A narrow sill would take the water and let gravel pass over instead of through the opening. The idea was simple. Cutting stones that met under load was not. I needed better traces. At dawn, I searched the upper terraces. I ignored the crane platform, where random impacts had churned the stone memory into noise. I ignored the lunch shelter, though its benches held a remarkably pure trace of sitting down. Near the buried channel, I found a wall with parallel chisel marks. The lowest marks were clumsy, the middle ones wandered. The highest row was even and shallow. An apprentice had trained there. I cleaned a strip along the final row. The limestone felt cool beneath my fingers. I tapped 3 times, each blow placed at the same angle. A rhythm entered my arm. Set, breathe, strike, listen. Not strength, correction. I cut the first side block by following that rhythm. Chips clicked against my boots. Each time the tone rose, I moved the chisel a finger's width. Each time it dulled, I stopped before forcing the crack. The block came free with one corner too thick, but the bedding face was sound. For the second block, the trace had already faded. I used chalk to mark every point where my first cut had changed direction. I compared the ring of the hammer to the color of fresh stone. Pale cream meant clean limestone. Gray meant damp material near a hidden fracture. My shoulders burned and my hands developed blisters under the borrowed gloves. But the second block matched the first within the width of my smallest finger. That difference mattered. It was mine. The rain strengthened by afternoon. Water climbed over the lowest terrace and pressed brown foam through the blocked channel. I dragged the first stone on a plank sled. It weighed more than I did. The rope cut into my palms. Halfway down the slope, the sled struck a buried rail and twisted. The block rolled. I jumped after it, which was a heroic decision only if heroes commonly forgot that stone was faster downhill. The block slammed into the retaining wall. Mortar dust burst from the joints. A whole section shifted toward the flooded channel. I froze with one hand on the rope. The wall gave a long, gritty sigh. My mistake had changed the job. If I pulled the block free, the weakened stones might collapse. If I left it, it blocked the only safe path to the drain. I studied the impact. The fallen block had wedged against 2 old foundation stones. The wall's weight was traveling through one corner. I could feel no magical answer waiting in the hammer. There was only rain, pressure, and a bad decision with my name on it. I cut a shallow seat into the bank beside the block. I used the damaged practice stone as a temporary brace, driving it under the leaning course with the blunt end of my wedge. Then I shaved the fallen block instead of moving it. Every strike was awkward. Mud swallowed my knees. Cold water ran inside my sleeves. The star crack on my practice block widened. I had perhaps 10 minutes. I trimmed the first side stone into a rough triangle and let the wall settle against its broad face. The damaged brace snapped with a sound like a plate breaking, but the new block held. I placed the second side stone opposite it. The space between them was crooked because my measurements had assumed a wall that had not moved. The cap block would not fit. I put it on the bank, marked the 2 high points with wet chalk, and cut them down. Test, lift, fail. Cut again. On the third attempt, the block entered halfway and stuck. Water was already curling around my boots. I could have smashed it through. The old journeyman trace still lingered at the edge of my muscles, offering that beautiful final swing. But the stone beneath the cap had a dark, damp band. A heavy impact would send a crack through the whole collar. I chose the narrow face of the hammer. Tap by tap, I dressed the joint. The sound moved from a dead knock to a clear note. When the cap finally slid home, its weight spread across both sides. I drove the sill beneath it and opened the packed drain with my wedge. Black water exploded through the gap. It hit my chest, threw me backward, and filled my mouth with the flavor of old leaves. I surfaced beside the sled, coughing. Behind me, water poured through the new collar in a clean, narrow stream. Gravel rattled over the cap. The leaning wall stopped moving. By evening, the quarry pond had fallen a full handspan. The road below remained dry. Cook Fen came up with 2 dormitory porters to inspect the channel. He looked at my soaked coat, the fitted limestone, and the brown river running safely under the road. "You were supposed to make gravel," he said. "I made a hole that gravel cannot block." He considered this, then handed me a covered pot. "I accidentally put too much stew in this." That night I ate beside a small stove while rain ticked on the repaired roof. The new spillway gave a deep, steady murmur outside. For the first time since the awakening, I did not feel as if the academy had placed me in a bin marked useless. A thing I had cut was holding weight. People I did not know were sleeping downhill from it. The silent voice returned. First permanent work completed. Hidden professional path recognized. Class awakened. Memory carver. The name did not add fire to my hammer or armor to my skin. It sharpened what I already sensed. When I touched the shed wall, the traces no longer felt like one crowded blur. I could distinguish broad families of work: cutting, carrying, impact, heat, spell pressure. I still had to expose the right layer. I still had to choose one trace. My hands still hurt. I smiled so hard that stew nearly came out of my nose. The next morning, someone had hammered a brass academy notice to my gate. The repaired drain had saved the lower road, so the work office had awarded me a payment of 12 copper marks. It had also charged me 8 for unauthorized alteration of academy property and 3 for the broken practice block. My first profit was 1 copper mark and a pot I was fairly sure belonged to the kitchen. I was studying this triumph when a girl climbed through the gate carrying a survey rod twice her height. She wore a gray field coat covered in chalk, and her dark hair had been tied back with a strip of map paper. Instead of introducing herself, she walked past me to the perfect block I had cut from the wall. She knelt, pressed a lens against its broken face, and whispered, "That cannot be here." "Good morning to you, too." "The grain bends downward." Her finger traced a faint silver curve. "This quarry is labeled uniform limestone. It is not uniform." She stood and finally looked at me. Her eyes were the green-gray of wet slate. "Mira Ven, Geology Division. You opened a hidden vein." "Rowan Clay, Gravel Division, apparently." Mira did not laugh until she realized I was serious. Then she made a short sound and covered it with a cough. She led me to the place where I had taken the block. Under daylight, I saw what she meant. The silver line did not follow the horizontal bedding. It curved into the quarry like the edge of a buried wheel. Mira scraped the surface with a steel pick, wet it, and held up her lens. "There are compression marks on the inner crystals," she said. "Regular ones. Something loaded this layer from below." I placed my palm against the wall. Cutting traces slept near the surface. Deeper down, beyond the reach of my prepared face, something vast and slow pressed against the stone memory. I cleaned a patch and made the 3 careful strikes. The hammerhead turned so cold that frost appeared on the rust. For one breath, I felt an arm larger than a tower set a foundation beneath a sky without human stars. The trace was far too deep and far too strong. It snapped away before I could hold it. A crack jumped across the hammer's face and stopped at the eye of the handle. Mira caught my wrist before I struck again. "Whatever you just found," she said, "you are not hitting it alone." Behind the thin limestone, the curved silver vein answered with one heavy pulse. Dust fell from the quarry wall in the shape of a giant hand. Mira's first request sounded modest. "I need 9 samples," she said. "Each one should be the length of my hand, marked with its original direction, and cut without shock fractures." That last part makes it less modest. "I have 6 silver marks." It has become modest again. She spread a map across my workbench, pinning the corners with chunks of limestone. The Academy survey showed the west quarry as a shallow bowl of ordinary rock. Mira had drawn the silver curve I exposed as a broken circle passing behind 3 quarry faces and beneath the old knight training yard. Red pencil marks showed fractures, blue marks showed water. "My professor says the curve is a stain from iron tools," she said. "If I bring him intact crystal faces from each level, he must test them. If I am right, the official map is wrong." "And if the official map is wrong?" "Then nobody should build on the East Bank." The East Bank held 2 storehouses, a dormitory, and the Academy laundry. I had never cared deeply about laundry, but I had begun to appreciate dry socks. Mira became my first client before breakfast. She wrote the order on the back of my fine for altering the drain, which gave the document a pleasing sense of revenge. The obvious way to take a sample was to drive a round chisel around a square and snap the center free. I demonstrated on a loose block. The sample looked perfect from the outside. When Mira wet the cut face, thin white feathers appeared inside the grain. "Impact fractures," she said. "The crystals have shifted. This tells me how you hit it, not how the layer formed." "So it is a very accurate sample of my failure." "Keep it. We may publish a paper about your technique." She smiled when she said it. Mira's humor was as dry as chalk and usually arrived after I had already been wounded by it. I could not ask the hammer for a magical core-cutting skill. No one had taken careful geological cores here. The quarry held memories of wedges, picks, carts, boots, rain, and one determined, limping man. I needed to build a method from those pieces. First, Mira showed me how crystal layers separated under pressure. She drew arrows on the stone and made me predict each fracture. I was wrong 5 times. On the 6th, I noticed that wet limestone darkened unevenly above a stressed edge. Next, I cut 4 narrow relief grooves around the sample. I used the memory carver sense to avoid the loudest bands of old impact. That sense did not reveal hidden cracks like a picture. It felt more like trying to hear one musician in a crowded room. I still had to stop, brush dust away, and test the face with a light tap. Finally, I made a thin wedge from beechwood, soaked it, and pressed it into the bottom groove. The wood swelled slowly. The stone resisted with a soft creak instead of a sharp snap. The first core came free after sunset. It had 1 chipped corner. Mira turned it under the lamp, touched the unbroken crystal face, and let out a breath. "It kept the pressure lines." "Is that worth 6 silver marks?" "One of them." We worked through the night on the other 8. The quarry changed when 2 people paid attention to it together. I saw old tool scars. Mira saw water stains and folded beds. She found a hidden clay pocket before my chisel entered it and stopped me from losing a whole sample. I noticed that one section carried a repeated hauling trace and guessed an old ramp lay behind the brambles. We cleared it and reached the upper face without climbing the broken stairs. At midnight, we drank bitter tea beside the stove. Mira had dust across her nose. I pointed at it, then discovered I had a white handprint on my own cheek. "Do not move," she said. She leaned close and wiped the mark away with her thumb. For one strange second, the rain, the stove, and the impossible vein all became very quiet. Then she examined the dust on her glove. Fine calcite from the lower layer. You have a gift for making moments scientific. Thank you. I was not sure she understood the complaint. By dawn, 9 samples stood in a padded wooden box. Each had a shallow arrow carved into its upper face and a number written on the cloth beneath it. I had also made a 10th because sample 4 had a hairline flaw. Mira had not seen it. I had heard the flaw when the stone answered my final tap half a note too low. That was the first proof that the impossible block had not been luck. The borrowed journeyman trace had shown me how one expert listened. Repetition had taught me what he listened for. Mira returned from the geology hall that afternoon with my 6 silver marks and an expression that could have cut granite. Professor Vale accepted the pressure lines, she said. He says the samples may have come from another quarry. He watched us carry the box through the gate. He says scientific caution has no eyes. She dropped a brass seal onto my bench. It bore the mark of the Academy grounds office. Instructor Dane wants 12 replacement blocks for the night yard. He saw your sample faces. His normal supplier cannot deliver for a month. Does he also lack eyes? No, he lacks patience. It may be more dangerous. The night yard sat above the oldest quarry face. Its west wall had absorbed decades of training. Wooden swords had struck it. Boots had driven against its base. Knights had pushed weighted sleds along it until the paving stones shone. Instructor Dane met us beside a row of cracked stance blocks. He was a narrow man with gray hair and the relaxed posture of someone who could throw me over a fence without spilling his tea. These blocks teach recruits where to place their feet when lifting a shield, he said. The old ones have sunk. I need 12 by the end of the week. I measured a block. Its top was angled, one end higher than the other. This is not normal paving. That is why I am paying a stonecutter instead of buying normal paving. He offered 30 silver marks, half on delivery. For that, I had to guarantee the blocks would not rock, crack, or teach a recruit to place weight on the wrong knee. The last condition was written twice. I chose dense limestone from the middle terrace. Ordinary quarry blocks came free quickly, but their grain varied. One split smooth while the next tore around a shell pocket. I could make 12 that looked alike, yet Instructor Dane had ordered 12 that behaved alike. Mira compared the samples from my chosen face. The southern end dried near an old vent, she said. Use the northern 6 paces. Same pressure, less crystal decay. That saved me 2 days and several ruined blocks. It also left the problem of the training angle. I pressed my hand to the old yard wall. The memory inside was deafening. Sword impacts crossed shield impacts. Summer heat lay over winter frost. Thousands of recruits had leaned against the same lower course, while Instructor Dane and teachers before him corrected their stance. I cleaned one stone behind the shield rack. Its surface was worn at shoulder height. The floor beneath it held 2 smooth hollows where boots had planted again and again. 3 deliberate taps opened the trace. Strength did not flood my muscles. Instead, I felt a sequence. Heel settled, hip turned, spine aligned. Shoulder drove after the feet. Thousands of training corrections had accumulated in the stone until wasteful movements had rubbed away like chalk in rain. Extracted trace, mastery of strength form, the silent voice said. I nearly laughed. A wall had better posture than half the academy. I carried the trace back to the quarry. It would fade at sunrise unless I used it. The memory carver class let me guide a chosen trace into fresh grooves, but only while I shaped the receiving stone by hand. It was not copying a spell. The new stone had to be similar enough to accept the pattern, and every groove altered how pressure traveled through it. I carved a shallow heel channel across the first stance block. Then I struck 3 points along the side while holding the old rhythm in my mind. The limestone warmed. Fine gold lines flashed in the groove and vanished. When I stood on the block, my body settled into the remembered position. The effect was gentle, like a teacher touching my elbow. It did not make me strong. It made the next correct movement easier to notice. I tested it with a crate of stone chips. My back stayed straight, my legs took the weight, and the crate rose. "Improved," Mira said. "You could sound impressed." "You are lifting rubbish." We set an ordinary block beside it. On the ordinary stone, my front knee drifted inward. On the carved stone, the pressure line under my boot nudged my heel until the knee aligned. The visible difference was small. After 20 lifts, the difference in pain was not. I began the full batch. Each block took a morning to cut, an afternoon to dress, and an evening to carve. I numbered them in order. The third had a shell pocket and became a doorstep for the shed. The sixth rang too sharply after I laid the trace and went into the reject row. My copper profit disappeared into new chisels, lamp oil, rope, and a handcart whose right wheel believed in freedom. On the 5th day, I had 12 finished stance blocks. Instructor Dane tested the first 3 himself. He lifted an iron shield, stepped, and nodded. Recruits tried the next 4. Their boots found the grooves. Their shoulders stopped rising before the push. Then a boy stepped onto block 8 and twisted hard to his left. He dropped the shield. Its rim struck the paving with a clang. I pulled him away before Dane spoke. My hand touched the block, and a cold confusion ran up my arm. The carved strength pattern was there, but beneath it lay an older quarry trace from workers turning a capstan. I had used stone from the edge of the buried ramp. The 2 repeated motions shared the same heel pressure and diverged at the hip. The block had passed every physical test. It was still dangerous. "Remove all 12, I said. Dane studied me. 11 are working. I cut them from the same band. I do not know which ones carry the turn. Your deadline ends tomorrow." Then I missed the deadline. Returning the advance would leave me owing 9 silver marks. Keeping the batch might injure someone after I was paid. The decision hurt, which was useful. Easy honesty was often just convenience wearing a clean coat. Mira and I hauled the blocks back in silence. At the quarry, she opened her map and circled the buried ramp. "This is my fault too," she said. "I mapped the stone, not the work that happened beside it." "You did not promise the blocks." "No, I promised the map." She drew a new symbol, a small black spiral. "From now on, human use is a geological layer." That mark became our solution. We needed fresh stone with no strong turning trace. Mira chose a face behind the old drainage pond, where silt had covered the limestone before the quarry opened. I pumped the last water through my spillway, scraped away the soft layer, and tested the clean bed. It held pressure, rain, and almost no repeated labor. We had 1 day. I could not cut 12 new blocks alone in that time. I asked Instructor Dane for 6 recruits. He arrived with 8 and made them follow my chalk marks. They cleared spoil, carried wedges, and turned the hand winch. I did every finish cut because the trace required my deliberate work, but I no longer wasted strength dragging chips or searching for tools. Mira checked each rough block for crystal decay. Dane checked every angle with his own feet. I carved one strength pattern at a time, using the cleanest section of the old training wall. After each transfer, I shattered a thumb-sized corner from the source strip. Extracted stone became pale and brittle. It could never safely hold weight again. That was another cost of my gift. Useful memory was a resource, and taking it changed the material forever. We worked under lanterns until my hand shook. On the final block, I placed the chisel wrong and cut across the heel groove. There was no time to hide it. I widened the cut into a drainage notch and adjusted the opposite side so the pressure remained balanced. At sunrise, 12 new stance blocks stood in the yard. The recruits tested all of them in random order. No hips turned, no blocks rocked. Instructor Dane set the returned payment on the wall, then added 5 silver marks. "For the late delivery?" I asked. "For withdrawing a dangerous product before I had to order you." "That sounds like a reward for fear." "Fear is excellent quality control when used early." He kept one of the rejected blocks on a red-painted base as a warning. The other 11 became material for pads where their mixed traces could do no harm. My error did not vanish. It became a rule in the yard and a black spiral on Mira's maps. The new blocks did more than earn money. Recruits trained on them each morning, adding clean repetitions to the carved pattern. The stone grew more useful through correct use. My work had become a small machine that improved because people trusted it enough to work with it. With the payment, I bought a proper roof for the shed, a sharpening wheel, and a second-hand iron stove. Mira claimed one shelf for maps. I claimed the shelf above it for tea, because maps did not leak when placed beneath cups. On the first warm evening, we sat outside and watched the repaired channel carry clear water. The quarry no longer looked abandoned. Cut blocks stood in labeled rows. Reject stone formed a dry path. A new crane rope hung from the upper beam. Mira handed me a folded sheet bearing the Geology Division seal. Her 9 cores had proven the silver band was not iron contamination. It was a ring of compressed mineral older than the Academy foundations. "My professor revised his opinion," she said. "He admitted you were right?" "He said new evidence had allowed him to improve the question." A graceful retreat. "He tripped over his own robe while retreating. That improved it." A rider arrived before I could answer. He wore a dark green coat marked with a mountain split by a white line. The crest belonged to the Holt mining clan, owners of Salt Deep Mine and half the stone trade north of Hale. He gave me a sealed contract. The lower supports at Salt Deep had begun to fail. Normal replacement arches cracked within hours because the mountain carried a repeating vibration no engineer could identify. The Holt heir had seen one of my stance blocks and wanted 60 fitted arch stones cut with a stabilizing work trace. Delivery was required in 10 days. Payment was 300 silver marks. Failure meant repaying the emergency transport, the borrowed crane, and every hour the mine remained closed. At the bottom, written in a firm hand, was one final line. "If you are a fraud, decline now. If you are not, bring your hammer." Mira read it over my shoulder. "That sounds friendly. I think this is how mining clans send flowers." From somewhere deep behind the quarry wall, the silver vein gave another slow pulse. The 12 new stance blocks answered it together. Lisa Holt met us at the entrance to Salt Deep Mine with a stopwatch in one hand and a broken archstone in the other. She was my age, with copper hair, a green clan coat, and black dust on her gloves. The silver clasp at her throat marked her as the Holt heir. The steel-toed boots marked what she valued. "Rowan clay?" she asked. "Yes." She threw the broken stone at me. "What happened to it?" she asked. I examined the fracture. Dark dolomite made up most of the block. Thin white lines crossed the grain at regular gaps. Repeated side pressure, not enough to break it once, enough to tire it. Lisa clicked the stopwatch shut. "Good. The last engineer said bad stone. The stone is better than his report." Mira lifted her survey case. "Do you throw samples at every contractor?" "Only the expensive ones." That was Lisa's welcome. Salt Deep employed nearly 200 miners, and the failed gallery produced the blue iron that paid them. The Stone Guild had offered emergency supports in exchange for permanent control of the transport road. Lisa intended to modernize the mine before its creditors divided it. On the way down, she gave us precise, painful facts. The vibration came every 47 breaths and lasted for 4. The east supports failed first. 3 suppliers had tried 3 stones, all cracked along the same white bands. "And you ordered 60 blocks from a man with 1 handcart?" I said. "I also sent a wagon, a crane, 6 cutters, and a contract large enough to purchase your attention." "You purchased terror. Attention came free." The lower gallery felt wrong before I touched anything. A tremor traveled through the floor, too soft to hear and too regular to be natural settling. Dust trembled in the lamp beams. Every 47 breaths, the wall gave 4 deep beats. Mira watched ripples cross a cup of water. "The force comes from west and below. It is not following the visible fault." Lisa pointed toward a bricked side passage.
There is nothing west. Old maps show solid rock. Official maps also showed my quarry as uniform limestone,
Mira said. Then I already dislike official maps. I cleaned a broken support face and made 3 careful taps. The stone memory opened. I felt picks striking, carts passing, braces taking weight. Under all of it ran a repeated pressure like a giant finger tapping a table. The trace tried to enter my hammer. The head shivered and the crack near its eye widened. I pulled away. I can feel the vibration, I said. I cannot hold it.
It is too large and too mixed.
Can you build around it?
Lisa asked. Yes, I said, because 200 jobs were listening. Then I added, after we learn what it is. Our first question was not how to cut 60 stones. It was what they needed to do. Normal arches passed force around a tunnel. Salt Deep's pulse struck from the side until rigid joints tired. We needed joints that shifted without opening. I designed 2 dolomite legs and a paler limestone crown key. Diagonal grooves would guide pressure upward instead of across the grain. Lisa changed the design before I cut anything. The cart wheels strike this side twice per load, she said, tapping the east leg. Reverse every second arch or your own traffic will create a new repeated force. She found the problem before I did. Mira then rejected a whole wagon because gypsum threads would soften underground. Lisa arranged the yard in a loop, and I set gauges so the clan cutters left the final finger width for me.
For 3 days, the system worked. 6 cutters freed rough blocks. I tested the ring, dressed the joints, and carved pressure grooves. Lisa timed each station. Mira logged every source bed. At sunset, 6 numbered arches lay in the yard. The first prototype went into the lower gallery on the 4th morning. We seated the legs and lowered the key with a chain hoist. At the next pulse, the grooves warmed. The crown shifted the width of a hair and settled without a white line. Lisa watched through 3 pulses. Build the rest. That was when success became dangerous. Cutting 1 good arch required attention. Cutting 19 more required speed. I laid 3 blocks side by side and guided the same stabilizing trace through them before sunrise. The hammer still held only 1 dominant pattern, and every transfer took something from the source and from me. By the 12th stone, my fingers were numb and the crack in my hammer had reached the handle. I bound it with wire and continued.
Stop, Mira said. We need 36 fitted pieces by tomorrow.
Your last groove is deeper than the first.
Then mark it for the inside leg.
Lisa looked from the order board to my hand. The deadline tightened her mouth, but she took the hammer away.
4 hours, she said. Sleep.
I slept for 2 and spent 2 searching records. An old plan showed a sealed academy tunnel where mages had practiced holding power in carved chambers. That was the rhythm missing from modern maps. Lisa ordered the bricks removed. Blue light leaked through the first gap. Beyond it, thousands of handprints covered a pale chamber where students had drawn mana inward, held it, and released it. The stone had become a lung. Every 47 breaths, it inhaled. I cleaned 1 handprint and struck 3 times. The trace entered more smoothly than the giant pulse beneath my quarry. My breath slowed. Warm pressure gathered behind my ribs, not as a spell, but as a practiced space waiting to be filled.
Extracted trace, mana reserve practice, the silent voice said.
It gave me no spell. It taught my body not to waste its small mana reserve. While cutting, that reserve warmed my chisel and reduced the groove's resistance. For the first time, I could finish 2 stones before my hands began to shake. I should have treated that improvement as a tool. Instead, I treated it as permission. We installed 12 arches whose keys came from 1 batch and whose grooves carried 1 mana rhythm. They were beautifully consistent. Lisa reopened the gallery for an empty cart test. The cart rolled beneath the first arch. Its wheels struck the rail joint. The first east leg warmed. The second answered. Then the third.
My perfect arches did not merely resist together, they remembered together. The next mountain pulse reached them as one wave. All 12 crowns shifted at the same instant and threw the force forward. The last arch took the pressure of the entire row. Its limestone key split. The sound was small. The result was not. The crown dropped. Cracks raced backward through the synchronized grooves. Lisa shoved a worker clear, and Mira pulled me behind a stone leg as the roof sank. My wired hammer jumped from my hand. Its head struck the rail and broke across the eye. Darkness swallowed the lamps. For several breaths, all I heard was falling grit. "Names!" Lisa called from the dark. "Say your names!" Voices answered. No one was buried, but Mira's brow and Lisa's elbow bled. A roof wedge sealed 3 ore carts and a month's production behind us. I found the 2 pieces of my hammer. The handle had split. My safer arches had almost brought down the mine. Lisa looked at the collapse, then at me. Her face had gone still. "The guild offer expires tomorrow," she said. "Now they will own the road. I will fix this." "With what hammer?" She did not shout. I wished she had. We closed the mine. 36 fitted stones became reject material, worth more than my contract. And the synchronized load made the collapse unsafe to clear one support at a time. My cheat could show me the memory inside the failure. It could not calculate the roof, manage a crew, choose a safe sequence, or repair trust. I set the broken hammer on the bench. "I made the arches too equal," I said. "The mixed block at the night yard taught the wrong movement. I decided all mixture was bad, so I purified every trace until 12 stones acted like 1 stone." Mira touched the crack map she had drawn after the collapse. "Natural rock survives because each layer delays the wave differently." Lisa stood across from us with her injured arm bound. Old Holt supports used timber wedges between stone courses. The records call them cheap. They may have been delays. There was our solution, divided among 3 people. Mira could measure the pulse. Lisa could schedule the removal and recover the old wedge pattern. I could cut joints with different traces instead of one command. First, I needed a hammer. Lisa opened a repair shop cabinet and removed a scarred mason's hammer. "My mother's," she said. "She cut the first safe chamber after the north slide. If you damage it, I will invoice your grandchildren." I tested the oiled ash handle. "This is worth more than my contract." "At the moment, your contract is worth less than my bandage." She let go only after I met her eyes. Trust returned as a loan, with terms. We spent the night making delay keys from 3 densities. I varied the joint depth. From a capstan base, I extracted slow turning. From the Mage chamber, reserve and release. From a timber seat fossilized in lime, compression. I did not mix them in one block. I assigned 1 trace to each position in a repeating group of 3. Stone accepted difference more safely than confusion. The test row looked imperfect. Black delayed the pulse. Pale lifted it. Gray softened what remained. A cup of water showed 1 low ripple instead of 4 rings. We began the rescue. Lisa called every movement. Mira drilled test holes and watched the dust. White meant limestone roof. Black meant loaded dolomite. Any change stopped the crew. I cut where the collapsed stone's memory was weakest. The borrowed hammer's crowned face favored wedges, so I adjusted my wrist. We installed arches in groups of 3, separated by Lisa's ashwood pads. I carved every receiving groove. The mana trace warmed my chisel, but cramped my ribs if held too long. At the sealed section, we found the fallen crown holding a slab the size of a house roof. Cutting it would release the load. Leaving it would keep the gallery closed. Mira found a band of small fossils curving through the slab. "This layer formed in shallow water," she said. "The shells will redirect a fracture upward." Lisa studied the crew positions. "If it lifts half a hand, we can pull the lost carts and place the final leg." The slab held the clear memory of our collapse. Extracting it required a receiving block strong enough to endure it. We rolled in the thickest rejected block. I dressed one face, cut 3 escape grooves, and drew the collapse trace through Lisa's mother's hammer. Pain struck my arm to the shoulder. The borrowed head rang. A dark line appeared across its face. I carved the trace in reverse along Mira's shell band. The block remembered compression. My grooves told it where to spend that memory. Stone rose the width of 2 fingers. Lisa shouted. Chains tightened. Crews hauled the carts. Timber slid into the gap. I drove the final delay key home with 3 short blows. The great slab settled onto the new arch. The next pulse traveled through the row as a sequence, not a command. Black, pale, gray. Hold, lift, soften. Dust remained on the roof. The lower gallery was safe. 19 arches, 11 timber pads, and 1 ruined block reopened the blue iron vein before dawn.
Lisa stood beneath the first delay arch while miners returned to work.
She touched its mismatched crown. "It is ugly," she said. "I can dress the faces." "Do not. I want every future engineer to ask why it is ugly." After subtracting ruined material, Lisa paid me 140 silver marks. I used 10 to repair her mother's hammer. The smith seated my cracked head inside a steel collar and fitted a new ash handle. It was heavier now. Every swing would recall the price of synchronized perfection. The silent voice spoke when I set the last rejected stone into a permanent warning wall beside the mine entrance. Scaled work failed, understood, and rebuilt. Hidden professional path advanced. Class awakened, lord of stone traces. My sense expanded through joints I had personally prepared. I could follow one trace across connected stones and choose where it weakened, turned, or ended. I still could not command uncut rock.
The path existed only where real joints and load-bearing work supported it. That was power I respected because I had learned exactly how it could fail. Lisa arrived at our wagon with 2 account books and a travel trunk. "What is that?" I asked. "My investment. It appears to contain socks." An heir can invest in more than one category. She offered a partnership between the Holt clan and my workshop. "You need transport rights. I need a product that keeps our road independent." Mira read the first page. "You charged him interest on the crane." "Of course." "I like her," Mira told me. "In a geological sense. Under pressure, she becomes sharper." Lisa looked at the chalk on Mira's coat. "You label your socks by mineral hardness, do you not?" They became friends by beginning an argument that lasted all the way back to Hale. At the academy gate, Master Soren Calder waited in a black guild coat. He had built roads and towers. He was a skilled engineer with a rational fear of structures that remembered more than their builders understood. He examined the collar around my hammer, the black spirals on Mira's map, and Lisa's signed partnership. "You have created load-bearing stone that can transmit trained action," he said. "You have also collapsed a licensed mine." "And repaired it," Lisa said. "After the collapse. That order matters." Soren gave me a formal notice. Under an old academy charter, any mineral capable of storing active spellcraft could be classified as a strategic reagent. Until I passed a guild competency exam, the West Quarry was closed to commercial work. Its stone, tools, maps, and contracts would remain under seal. "You cannot seal his class," Mira said. "No," Soren replied, "but I can stop an unlicensed workshop from teaching a bridge to fail in unison." I could not call him wrong. That made him far more troublesome than a bully. Behind us, the silver ring in the quarry pulsed. All 3 guild wagons sank a finger into the road, as if something beneath the academy had taken a deeper breath. The guild sealed my quarry with a chain, 6 wax stamps, and the confidence of men who believed a chain could persuade a mountain. The next pulse snapped 2 stamps before breakfast. Master Soren did not pretend he had failed to notice. He ordered everyone away from the gate and placed measuring rods along the road. The rods leaned toward the quarry by noon.
The ground has moved 3 finger widths, Mira said. 2.5, Soren replied. Your rods are crooked. Your horizon mark is chalk. They argued with such professional calm that I knew the news was terrible. The Academy Council gave Soren 3 days to decide whether to fill the quarry, close the Western dormitories, or let me attempt a guild competency exam. He chose the exam because packing the quarry with rubble would take a week. He also made the conditions nearly impossible. I had to demonstrate controlled extraction, a useful product, and a safe failure. I could use no unlicensed memory stone taken after the closure. The test would occur in the old arena, before guild engineers and the Academy Council. If I failed, Soren would seal the silver vein beneath 30 wagon loads of lime concrete. He is giving you a chance, Mira said as we carried our equipment to a borrowed stable. He has an unusual way of displaying kindness. Lisa pushed a new work table through the door. He also gave us a specification. Specifications can be beaten without being insulted. The stable became our temporary workshop. Mira hung geological maps over the feed racks. Lisa built an order board from a stall door and listed our legal materials. I set the sharpening wheel beside the water trough. A horse in the next stall watched me repair chisels with deep concern. We possessed 11 rejected stance blocks, 4 unused delay keys from Salt Deep, my collared hammer, and every stone already built into the arena. The last item mattered. Soren had forbidden us from removing memory stone, not from examining Academy property. The arena had hosted training for more than a century. Thousands of students had charged across its floor, struck target posts, cast practice shields, and fallen down with varying degrees of dignity. If I opened one paving slab, I heard a storm of crossed traces. Using that storm directly would repeat my Salt Thief mistake on a much larger scale. I needed a product that failed safely. Lisa suggested a breakaway rescue platform. During monster drills, damaged practice constructs sometimes pin students against the arena wall. A low stone platform could carry a heavy construct, then split along a chosen line if the weight moved toward the spectators. The fall would be small, controlled, and away from people. Mira inspected the arena foundations. She returned with dust in her hair and a piece of black mortar. The south half is built over a void, she said. The official plan shows solid foundation. How large a void? I asked. Large enough that I stopped jumping to test it. That changed the plan. A breakaway platform could prove my control, but only if the arena itself did not fail first. Soren's exam weight was a 6-ton stone training beast. Rolling it across an unknown hollow would be less a test and more a delayed burial. We told him. Soren drilled 2 narrow cores beside Mira's mark. Both reached normal foundation. I will reduce the moving load, he said. The test continues. Your cores missed, Mira replied. Or your soundings found an old drain. We have 3 days and a shifting hill. I cannot excavate every theory. He was making a decision with limited time, equipment, and trust. I hated it because I understood it. We built the rescue platform in the stable yard. I arranged 4 rejected stance blocks around 3 Salt Deep delay keys. Their old traces were dangerous in their original uses, but I cut away the mixed heel grooves and turned them inward. The delay keys went between them. I dressed a shallow fault line across the top and carved 2 routes beneath it. Normal pressure flowed to the ground. Side pressure entered the fault. The horse sneezed on me during the barrel test. Quality inspector, Lisa said. Its report is concise. The first test failed badly, but usefully. We pulled the barrel sideways. The platform split at the correct line, then both halves kicked outward. One struck the stable wall and cracked a water bucket. I had carved the escape routes too straight. The fracture spent its force after the break instead of before it. For the second version, Mira chose a shell-rich piece whose internal curves scattered cracks. Lisa added a timber lip to catch the falling half. I curved the route down and inward. When we dragged a loaded ore cart toward the danger side, The top slab cracked with a dry pop. One half lowered onto the timber lip, the other remained locked. Not dramatic, exactly safe. We had our product. On exam morning, every bench was full. Crowds turned risk into theater. Instructor Dane brought in a stone training beast resembling a bull designed by someone who disliked bulls. Soren inspected my hammer collar, every joint in the platform, and the prepared fault line. He asked why I had used rejected material. Because a wrong trace in one job can become a useful trace in another, I said. The red marks show where it must never be cut again. He nodded once. That was the kindest thing he had done. The first part went cleanly. Dane rolled the stone beast onto the platform. The blocks held. He drove it forward with a practice spell. I struck the release point. The top broke along my line and lowered the beast into a shallow stone cradle, away from the painted student zone.
The arena applauded. Soren did not. He knelt beside the broken edge, checked for thrown chips, and said, "Useful product demonstrated. Safe failure demonstrated. Now controlled extraction." He placed an untouched paving block before me. I had to identify one dominant trace, extract it, and carve a visible result into a blank tile. I put my hand on the paving. Old training rushed beneath my palm. Feet drove forward, spears stopped, shields rose. Again and again, forgotten students had practiced strength against the arena floor. The individual movements crossed, but the direction beneath them was consistent. Every force went down before it went out. Then I felt something else. The foundation under the paving was not solid. A curved joint ran below the arena, part of the same silver ring Mira had mapped through my quarry. It carried each forgotten training impact into the hollow. The arena had been feeding the buried structure for generations. The morning pulse arrived early. The south benches dropped a finger. Mira stood. "Clear that section." Soren raised his hand to the council. "Orderly evacuation." The crowd moved, too slowly at first. Dust rose between the paving stones. A crack appeared beneath the 6-ton training beast and raced toward the occupied west gate. I could not stop uncut rock. I could route a trace through joints I had prepared. During construction of the rescue platform, I had dressed its bottom faces against 4 arena stones. Those stones touched the older paving joints. The path was imperfect, but it reached the silver ring. Thousands of forgotten training blows pressed beneath my hammer. I selected one dominant order. Down, then out. I pulled until the collar around the head burned my palm. The arena did not give me strength for free. My shoulders had to hold the tool. My feet had to find the mastery of strength form. My mana reserve had to keep the trace from scattering before the strike.
I chose a line between the moving benches and the gates. Then I swung. The blow sounded no louder than a quarry bell. The arena split. A clean fracture circled the south half, followed the empty seating aisle, and turned toward the center. Paving rose on one side and lowered on the other. The 6-ton beast slid into the safe cradle we had already built. The crowded gates remained level. For a few seconds, no one made a sound. Then the center paving folded inward like the petals of a gray flower. Below it lay a stairway descending into blue darkness. Soren looked at my hammer, then at the controlled fracture. I asked for a tile. The floor had a larger opinion. He almost smiled. Almost. The competency seal appeared above the broken platform in blue guild light. I had passed, but nobody celebrated for long. Warm air rose from the stairway, carrying dust older than the academy. Mira compared the exposed curve to her map. "This stair runs under the quarry." Lisa checked the arena gates and began assigning workers to barriers before anyone asked. Soren ordered the council back and followed us down with 4 guild engineers. The stair ended at a wall that looked grown rather than built.
Bands of limestone, granite, and black glass curved around one another without mortar. At its center stood the shape of a girl inside a clear mineral layer. She had closed eyes, stone-gray skin, and hair formed from thin, overlapping plates. One hand rested on a long mason's staff. The other covered a hexagonal mark in the wall. Mira whispered, "She is part of the layer." I touched the stone beside her, not the clear layer itself. The memory was older than every trace I had found. Tools struck in rhythms with more than two hands. Foundations moved before the first human road crossed the hill. A vast being pressed the Academy's shape into soft rock, then left the stone girl to guard its work. The pulse came again. The clear layer cracked.
The girl's eyes opened. They shone amber, like lamplight through honey-colored crystal. She stepped out of the wall and placed the end of her staff against my hammer. "Unauthorized hand," she said. Her voice sounded like two smooth stones turning together. "Licensed this morning," I replied. Soren closed his eyes briefly. "Please do not test ancient law with guild paperwork." The stone girl looked at him, then at Mira and Lisa. "Late tenants, loud, poorly balanced." "That is fair," Mira said. The guardian called herself Tessa. She had awakened because the foundation ring had lost one of its 6 anchors. For thousands of years, the ring had collected repeated work from the surface and fed it into a sealed memory below. The Academy had not built the oldest foundations. It had grown around them. "Who made the ring?" I asked. "Arun," Tessa said. "Builder before counting, keeper of weight. He rests beneath the final course." The vast arm I had felt in the quarry belonged to him. Soren asked the important question. "What happens if we fill the west quarry?" "Your lime will harden across 3 release joints," Tessa said. "The next memory tide will lift the Academy into pieces." Soren went pale, but he did not argue. Competence recognized competence, even when one side had been asleep for ages. Tessa's oath required her to seal the stair and remove every unauthorized tenant from Arun's foundation. That included the entire Academy. Her practical problem was that she could no longer operate the ring alone. One stone arm had split while she slept, and the missing west anchor lay behind the silver vein in my quarry. "You must leave," she told us. "I must fail correctly." "We have experience with failing correctly," Lisa said. "We also repair afterward." Tessa's amber gaze settled on the bandage still covering Lisa's elbow. Then she examined Mira's map and the collar around my hammer. "You mark errors." "If we do not," I said, "the next person pays for them." That answer opened the stair, though Tessa pretended it was the guild seal. We returned to the quarry as a team of 4 and a worried Master Soren. He removed the chains himself. The Academy Council granted us 2 days before evacuation began. Lisa secured Holt wagons, timber, food, and night crews. She also negotiated a price for each item while the hill moved beneath us, which I found both impressive and alarming. Mira remapped the silver ring using the broken arena as a second reference point. She discovered that the curve was not 1 vein, but 6 fitted mineral bands. 5 remained locked. The west band had slipped downward beside my repaired drain. Tessa walked through the quarry, touching old blocks with her good hand. She did not extract memories as I did. She heard whether stone still belonged to the shape Orun had given it. At the lower terrace, she stopped. "Your spillway saved this anchor," she told me. "I built it to keep socks dry." A worthy oath. It was the first time she made a joke. Her expression did not change, so I required several seconds to recognize it. We needed to expose the west anchor without releasing all the pressure stored behind it. Tessa proposed an ancient solution: remove the Academy. Soren proposed a guild solution: build a full timber shell around the quarry and dig for a month. Neither fit our 2-day limit. I proposed a temporary trace gate. We would build 3 short arches across the silver band. Mira would place them on stable beds. Lisa would stagger their material and work shifts. Tessa would align their joints with the old ring. I would carve a path through the arches into the repaired drain, letting the first pressure escape as movement and water instead of a fracture. Soren examined the drawing. Once you cut the old anchor, the gate must be completed before the next tide. How long? I asked. Tessa placed her hand on the ground. 7 hours? And if we stop? The unfinished path will direct the full memory tide into the lower dormitories. There would be no safe pause. The production line had to keep moving after the first cut. We prepared everything before touching the anchor. Holt crews brought black dolomite. Academy porters brought clean limestone from the north shelf. Soren supplied granite keys from the guild wagons. Mira marked every bedding direction in red. Lisa arranged duplicate ropes, wedges, lamps, and chisels at each station. Tessa rejected our first crane position because an ancient joint lay beneath one wheel. When Soren's engineer questioned her, she pressed her staff to the ground. The empty crane rolled half a pace on its own. He moved it. At sunset, the 3 arches stood in rough pieces around the lower terrace. Nothing touched the silver band yet. My hammer had been sharpened. My mana reserve was full. Every person knew the sequence. Tessa sat beside me while I dressed the first contact face. Chips fell between our boots. Up close, her stone skin held tiny mineral stars. Oren made you to guard this place, I said. What do you want? She watched my chisel instead of me. To know whether his final work was a shelter or a prison. And if it was a prison, to know which side I guard. That answer was more frightening than any monster story. It was also honest. I offered her the hammer so she could feel its balance. Her stone fingers closed over mine on the handle. The old tool looked very small between us. It remembers breaking, she said. So do I. Good tools do. We stayed that way one breath too long. Then Lisa called that the crews were ready, and Mira loudly informed no one that the correct geological term for our silence was pressure. I set my chisel against the ancient silver seam. The first strike cleared the weathered surface. The second opened the grain. The third connected my hammer to a memory older than humanity. Tessa drove her staff into the first gate socket. Lisa released the crane brake. Mira called the stone angle. I cut the west anchor. Blue light burst through the seam. The quarry floor rose beneath my knees. Every bell in Hale Academy rang once without being touched. The first granite key swung toward the open joint. We had 7 hours to build a path for several thousand years of forgotten work. The first granite key missed its socket. It swung above the blue seam. Lisa and 6 workers hauled the guide rope, but the key struck the ancient anchor and threw sparks. "Stop the crane!" Mira shouted. "The left bed is rising." The floor had tilted. A clay layer beneath the anchor was swelling with heat. A forced key would roll free when it settled. Tessa planted her mason's staff against the silver seam. Amber lines spread along her stone arm. "I can hold this joint for 40 breaths." "You said 7 hours," I told her. "For the whole ring. This piece is impatient." Ancient construction has terrible customer service. Her mouth almost moved. I had nearly made a stone guardian smile during a disaster. I crawled under the hanging key with my chisel. Soren caught my coat. "If the chain slips, your class will not matter." "Then make sure the chain does not slip." He added 2 braces and stood at the break. The rising bed pressed my shoulder. Following Mira's red line, I cut a crescent into the granite socket. Chip, rush, test. The colored hammer was heavy, but it kept each swing short. At 30 breaths, Tessa's stone fingers cracked. At 36, my chisel reached the clay pocket. Hot water hissed through the cut. "Lower!" I shouted. The key descended, slid across my new seat, and turned into the socket. The memory tide entered the first gate. My Lord of Stone Trace's sense found the path fraying at one high corner.
I dressed it under load with light taps until the note cleared and blue light moved toward the drain.
Water exploded from my old spillway and arced over the road. The first gate held. For 6 hours, the process moved. Mira rejected a granite key with a washed-off bedding mark. Lisa traded 2 pulleys for its replacement. Tessa aligned joints through her staff. I prepared every final face and route. We did not hurry by skipping steps. We hurried by ensuring the next stone, rope, wedge, and pair of hands waited before the current step ended. At the 5th hour, my mana emptied and a groove went cold. Mira brought tea. Lisa dressed the next face to my chalk line while I breathed through the mage rhythm. Tessa kept the path open. When I stood again, 3 people had prevented my gift from becoming a single point of failure. The final arch locked with 9 minutes left. I connected it to my first spillway collar. Its deep water trace turned pressure into a surge beneath the road. The gates warmed in sequence. The academy bells fell silent. The hill settled. No one cheered until Mira checked all 6 measuring rods. Then the crews made enough noise to begin a new geological layer. The gates were only a temporary result. They bought us time and opened a passage behind the west anchor. Beyond it, stairs descended around the silver band into a chamber beneath the quarry. At the bottom waited the memory of Orun. Black glass formed a 6-armed figure taller than a tower. Silver lines ran from its hands into the foundation. Repeated work had made material and memory the same thing. When I raised my hammer, the vein showed me one instant. Orun stood beneath unfamiliar stars. One pair of hands cut foundations, another lifted walls, and the third grooved a circular chamber where short-lived people could leave work for those after them. Then the memory shifted. Something below the hill struck upward. Orun knelt over it and became the final course. Tessa watched the image with her good hand over the hexagonal mark on her chest.
Shelter and prison, she said. Both. Soren examined the silver lines. Can the west gate hold permanently? No, I said. We moved the pressure. We did not give it a safe place to remain. 6 empty bays surrounded Orun. Tessa understood their joints, Mira their mineral directions, and I their work. They were an archive. The ring was meant to sort useful repetitions into separate courses, but the bays were unfinished. Every drill, spell, hammer blow, and footstep above had entered one vein. It was full. We needed to finish a workshop begun before humanity. I designed 6 archive ribs for mining, strength, mana, movement, heat, and unsorted labor. Salt-deep delay keys would stop synchronized answers. The spillway would cool them. A blank central course would protect Orun's load-bearing memory. Soren studied the plan for a long time. If this works, the Academy gains a permanent training resource. Lisa shook her head. The Academy, the Holt crews, and every worker whose repetition feeds it. I will not help replace one guild monopoly with another. They argued ownership beneath a being older than ownership. Tessa settled it. The archive belongs to those who add labor and those who preserve it. No hand may own the memory of every hand. Soren asked whether ancient guardians had legal authority. Lisa asked whether he wanted to challenge one in court. By dawn, the Stone Archive Trust divided access, transport, inspection, mapping, and stone preparation among the Academy, Holt clan, Guild, Mira's division, and my workshop. Tessa alone could veto work on Orun's vein. Then we had to build it. The first material problem was black memory glass. Steel chisels skated across it and lost their edges. My hardest blow left a white spark and a dent in my hammer collar. Mira examined the powder from the dent. The glass contains garnet crystals. We need an abrasive at least as hard, not a harder impact.
Lisa sent for blue iron and quartz. Tessa showed me an ancient grinding channel. I packed a blue iron cutting bar with garnet and quartz paste and drove it with my hammer. The first bar bent. The second jammed on dry paste.
A drip tube kept the third wet and carried black powder into a marked basin. Scrape, tap, rinse. The work was slow enough to make a glacier impatient. After an hour, a clean, finger-deep channel crossed the glass. Guildsmiths copied the successful bar, Holt crews mixed abrasive, and students pumped water. I still set every route and finished every receiving face. We worked for 6 days. First, Mira found clay behind the south bay, so we shifted the strength rib and added dolomite feet. Next, a guild depot held Lisa's limestone under the old order. She returned before sunset, seated on the released wagon, with a junior clerk looking educated. She changed the assembly order instead of demanding faster cuts.
Then Tessa found her own creation memory beside Orun's maker mark. Removing it would make the mining rib fit and erase her first waking.
"The archive needs the space," she said.
"Then we move the rib," I replied.
"You moved the strength rib already."
"It survived."
We offset the bay and cut a curved connector. That night, Tessa placed her cracked hand over mine while I sharpened the hammer. "You preserved work that cannot improve your class," she said. "It improved the workshop." She rested her forehead against my shoulder. Mira studied an upside-down map. Lisa recorded an unpriced structural sentiment. We raised ribs of 2 legs, a delay key, and 6 removable tiles. Chains clattered and wet stone scraped. At each landing, I checked the tone and trimmed the high point. A coin-wide flaw could send a century of work into the wrong stone. We connected the Mage tunnel through a pale conduit.
Young mages performed careful hold and release breaths, giving the mana tiles a clean first pattern. We linked the night yard and installed its red warning block at the entrance. Memory could teach an error as easily as a skill. Before linking the quarry, we calibrated the removable tiles. Dane performed 10 slow shield lifts on a temporary plate above. The strength tile warmed, but so did 2 tiles in the movement rib. The archive was leaking 1 lesson into 3 shelves. Tessa found no error in the ancient alignment. Mira dusted the joints with red chalk and asked us to repeat the test. When we removed the tiles, the chalk had rubbed away at their upper corners. Our human-cut tiles were perfectly equal, but Orun's bays narrowed slightly toward the center. I could not solve that with a stronger trace. I numbered every tile, scraped the high corners by the thickness of a paper sheet, and reset them in their original positions. Cut, brush, seat, test. On the 4th cycle, only the strength tile warmed. Dane's next lift left a clean heel-set pattern without bleeding into movement. Lisa added fitted position numbers to the inspection contract. Mira recorded the narrowing on her map. Soren required a chalk test before every future tile change. A tiny difference had become a permanent maintenance rule instead of a hidden defect. The final connection came from my first quarry wall, where generations had cut foundation stone. I exposed a narrow strip below the journeyman cuts. Set, breathe, strike, listen. The first borrowed movement of my story entered the hammer again. I compared it with my habits instead of surrendering my arms. The worker favored his right shoulder. I kept my hips lower and used Mira's grain marks. His mastery was 1 expert's answer to 1 wall. I carved it into the first removable mining tile, then added my own corrected sequence beside it. The tile warmed. A clean note passed down the mining rib. All 6 archive bays lit. Orun's memory vein opened its eyes. 6 remembered arms moved through the foundation. The strength rib lifted, the mana rib inhaled, and the mining rib fractured toward the quarry. Soren shouted for evacuation. Tessa raised her staff. "It is not attacking, it is continuing." Orun's last action was building the ribs. Unless we completed his sequence, the memory would repeat until the archive tore apart. The trace was too large to hold. Extracting it would erase Orun and the foundation he supported. So I did not extract it. I worked beside it. I matched the first arm's mining cut. Above, Dane's crews gave the strength rib a clean direction. Young mages filled their bay in Salt Deep's staggered rhythm.
Mira saw the heat line reach the clay lens before I did. "Move the release down 2 grooves." I cut toward her mark. Hot water burst into the spillway conduit. Lisa saw the north key rise on its chain. "Counterweight, now!"
Her crews dropped 2 loaded spoil carts onto the lifting line. The key settled. Arun's final hand reached through Tessa's chest mark, and her oath ordered her to close the archive. She planted her broken hand on the blank central stone instead. "The late tenants are builders," she said. "Record them." The entire chamber struck back. The shock reached my hammer through every prepared joint. The steel collar split. The repaired head began to open along its old crack. Releasing the tool would save my hand and erase the quarry traces we had preserved. I turned the hammer sideways. Instead of fighting the crack, I used it as a delay joint. One half struck before the other, dividing the force. I sent 1 pulse through the mining tiles and 1 into the blank course. The handle bent. The last groove waited. Set. Breathe. Strike. Listen. I completed the cut. The sound crossed 6 ribs and returned as the clear note of a block separating where intended. Arun stopped building. The black glass arms lowered. Silver light filled the removable tiles, and the ring became still. Above us, the quarry wall opened along a harmless, prepared seam. A final limestone block slid free and landed squarely on the sled beside my shed. The silent voice spoke. Ancient enterprise completed. Living foundation stabilized. Hidden professional path fulfilled. Class awakened. Master of underground secrets. The class revealed connected underground work, where loads ended, tool paths hid, and extraction would damage the structure, preserving a secret. Some memories had to stay buried to hold up everything above. My hammerhead finally separated. Both halves fell into my hands instead of the floor. Tessa joined them with blank overflow stone. Soren forged an open collar around the moving crack. Mira marked the halves. Lisa charged me 1 copper mark, apparently romantic by mining clan standards. 1 month later, the West Quarry was no longer a punishment assignment. The old shed became a workshop with a dry roof, 2 benches, labeled racks, and a red-marked teaching wall. My first spillway still ran beneath it. The stone archive opened 3 mornings each week. Miners practiced safe cuts, knights learned strength form, and mages expanded reserves through breathing. Removable tiles allowed inspection before traces became mixed. Mira mapped the 6 bands. Lisa managed transport, sales, and the trust. Tessa guarded Orun and taught us ancient joints. She also sat beside the stove while insisting stone did not enjoy warmth. My scholarship returned. I used it to hire 2 work students who had received classes the academy called weak. I did not promise them hidden power. I promised sharp tools, honest labels, and work that remained after applause ended. On quiet evenings, Mira brought samples, Lisa contracts, Tessa ancient questions, and I brought tea. All 3 called mine the least technical contribution. The local task was finished. The hill stood. The archive worked. The workshop earned enough to replace its own tools, and the skills inside its stones grew through real labor rather than vanishing at sunrise. Then a Holt wagon arrived from a mine beyond the northern border. Its only cargo was a block of black foundation glass. No human tool had marked its outer face. The cuts were on the inside, pushing outward. There were 6 parallel grooves, each wider than my hand. When I touched the block, my new class followed the hidden work deep below the northern mountains. Something there was hammering upward. Tessa placed her palm beside mine. The amber light in her eyes dimmed. "Arun had 5 kin," she said. "He built a school. They built locks." The internal hammer struck again. This time, my repaired tool answered. I looked at Mira's empty map table, Lisa's transport ledger, Tessa's ancient staff, and the quarry that had become our home. The academy had sent me to crush ordinary stone. Instead, I had learned that no stone was ordinary after someone had worked beside it long enough.
And somewhere under the northern mountains, another buried worker had just placed an order.